Hello, listeners of the Art Versations podcast. Hello, and welcome back to Art Versations, or if this is your first tune in, welcome. Come on in. Make yourself comfy. The voice you are currently hearing is Bri, like the cheese. I'll be your host for the next hour. I hope that your days have been filled with a wagon-sized pile of creative discoveries. I am discovering more and more about the importance of critically discussing the pieces of art that I consume. An exemplary artist who succeeds in this task, in my opinion, is my next guest, Jillian Robinson. Jillian is a Toronto-based actor, singer, and an associate producer for the online hub of theater enthusiasts, Cup of Hemlock Theatre. Go check out all their content. You might even see an episode that I was a guest on. Jillian and I talk about her role on Cup of Hemlock, her current project Playing Buttons, which you can get tickets for, link in the description. And we even get into her partial photographic memory. So cool. She's a well-rounded ball of energy, listener, and I was so grateful to have her time. Let's hear from Jillian Robinson.
If it's go time, baby, I can bam, let's activate this
Like a super
photographic memory.
A literal magician.
Basically. I can
Hi, Jill.
Hi, Bri.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm so excited that we get to do this little exchange. I was a guest on Cup of Hemlock, and now you're in my home, and we're going to do a little Art Versations.
I love it.
I'm so grateful.
We should just do this every once in a while.
Yeah.
Because
Truly, though.
It's amazing.
See where the state of art is?
Yeah. Pivoting and pirouetting, I think I said in the
Yes.
Cup of Hemlock episode. Yeah.
We can totally have some puns come in today.
Oh, that's going to be happening a lot. Apologies in advance.
Yeah, thank you for being here and making your way downtown. Because I always feel like it's better to be in person and engage with each other.
Yeah.
But I know that currently there's a lot of up and downs about safety and health, so I'm glad that you're doing well and that we're both here
Likewise.
and can be together. What's a piece of art that's inspiring you right now?
Piece of art that's inspiring me. I think I have a couple.
Sure.
If that's okay.
Absolutely.
No spoilers, but I just caught up with The Handmaid's Tale. And I sobbed almost every episode this season.
Yeah.
It's pretty par for the course for most of those episodes, but Elizabeth Moss directed some of the episodes this series. Honestly, some choices didn't hit the mark fully for me and under her guise, but this last episode there was a lot of wonderful imagery and set dressing dramaturgy that was packed a season finale punch. Pretty much. I mean, not to kind of start us off on a Debbie Downer, but the world we live in right now is not okay, and that is putting it lightly. And I just find this show is so important to watch as an artist and also just as a human being under the scope and under the eyes of political things happening right now. Not only at home, but across borders, across seas. Kind of reminds me of why I do what I do. And kind of one of my pillars as an artist is I love political theater. I think it's so important. And I'm certainly not someone who always wants to be doing it or viewing it or watching it. But I think the arts have such an important part of showing certain sides of issues that society doesn't necessarily let us have a look into or feel into. Yeah. Because in my opinion, society kind of does the opposite of what the arts do. It's a go, 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 especially Western North American society. It's a go, 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 squash your emotions and just get the job done. Right. Whereas the art is hello, welcome to a space where you can crack open and be vulnerable and see different viewpoints, practice viewpoints, if we are talking literal theater.
Tina Landau.
Yeah.
Totally. Great.
And so I think that show, it's constantly on the fence of amazing, astonishing art. I think some of the actors in that show are phenomenal emoters, but then also, it's fiction, but a lot of the stuff that happens is pretty close to home. So yeah, so that show to me over the last couple of weeks, especially as I just kind of wrapped watching the season, it's just kind of like a wake up call. It's like a check-in of me as the artist and also as a person living in a political society, whether I like it or not.
Yeah. Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
That's I mean, I haven't seen it yet. I've been waiting until it's all ready to be watched.
Yeah.
But you just said so much there, like there is such an importance to like telling stories like that, because in my opinion it is like a preparation or a discussion around like where we're going.
Yeah.
And as females, or as, like just people who are carriers of life, like that's also something, in the conversation.
Absolutely.
And having those emotions and not being afraid to talk about them.
Yeah. I guess to pick up, carriers of life and female, another kind of piece of art that's going to support the piece of art that I was going to mention.
Yes.
There's a whole little tie here.
I love it.
House of Dragon. I've also been watching too.
Huge fan.
Again, I would love to be in a period drama or like a fantasy thing, like being. Can I swear on here?
Yeah,
being a badass,
yes.
like battle mama bear. That is the energy I definitely would feel so grateful to be able to exude on a screen or a stage in the future. Totally. And so, my adrenaline just spikes watching that show, and it's so great. But then, so the reason why I bring that up kind of as like this linking bridge, I've been listening to a lot of classical, but like epic ambient music. So I guess something that you might hear in like battlefields of like a Game of Thrones-esque show or movie, or even just as underlying score in like a Handmaid's Tale or something. That's stuff that's like heavily infused with violins and cellos. Cinematic, and if there's, I'm also a huge EDM fan too, so if there's like that drop or that like epic release into something bigger,
it's rocket.
It's just like music like that. I remember when I was in school, I would write essays to that type of music, or even like EDM. And now it's like, going for a run with that type of music, or even just if I'm feeling I need to be inspired, but maybe not, move my body or like practice text or whatever, even just listening to that type of music kind of mentally gets me in a creative space that is like enough for some days.
Totally. It's like a flow, or like you just dive in with the music.
Kind of, yeah. Or if I'm just, even days when I'm feeling kind of like catatonic or like a no bones day, but I'm like, the perfectionist in the back of my head is like, you're not doing any work. What's wrong with you? When the, calm relaxer in me is like, well, you need to chill, but you can do things that are kind of like extensions of practicing art, but not going to fully exhaust. And so popping on epic battle ambient music, sometimes that's the trick. Yeah.
So cool. I love that you're a lover of fantasy and creating like worlds outside of our own. I think that is a really needed escape for audiences.
Absolutely.
Especially with so much dread and political disaster at the moment. And we won't get too political, but I think that's really interesting as well, that it's a part of your practice and like something that you keep in mind as you're making art.
Yeah. And I think it's just so important. Like as a person, I always have the kindness is key sort of through line through whatever I do.
Love it.
And it's hard. It's hard as shit to be kind some days. Trust me. Like it is not easy. And it seems like such an easy concept to be like, oh, kindness is key. Okay, great. But no, things happen. People pivot, situations throw wrenches in day to day.
Yeah.
But if there's just even a tiny spark of kindness backed behind any sort of interaction or project or process, then like communication will be easier. Success will be sprinkled throughout the whole process. It's like this wonderful, positive domino effect. And it's just a part of my self-care. Well, and I've been told by friends and family and colleagues of like, wow, you're such a shiny person to have in a room. And you really do like lift up a team. And I think it's making sure that me as a person, like I am, again, self-care, I am aligned, I am as detoxified as I can be coming into a space, which again isn't easy, and some days will be quote unquote off days. But yeah, I think it's just coming at, especially in the arts, like we work in such a team building oriented setting.
Yes.
Not every team player is going to be at their best every day, but if you feel the energy and you can be, then I'm just like, yeah, well then that's kind of your purpose, right? To kind of be that light, that aura in the space. But again, fitness is very important to me. Staying connected with my family is very important to me. Taking self-care moments, scrolling on Pinterest to wind down off a day, like just kind of dotting all my I's, crossing my T's, so that it's the classic thing of like, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you gonna love someone else, right? And it's like, so, and I feel like I've always kind of been like that, but being older and more things are thrown on your plate of like taking over financial responsibilities, kind of cementing career opportunities or what have you, things are firing your way. And I'm very glad I have this sort of system with myself of, okay, what do we need today to make Jill function?
Right.
And then let's click into that. And then hopefully that just can be infused in a space when it needs to be infused. So sometimes getting me out of bed is like an epic Game of Thrones-esque battle cry. Yeah. And I'm like, yes!
You are Jon Snow in the Battle of the Bastards. I want to go back. That was like an amazing through line. I can tell you're a host of a series. But I wanted to just go back to what you said about taking care of the internal to be able to help the external space. That's something I've also like investigated in my life, and it's definitely not perfectly molded at the moment, but like just recognizing that like if I can figure out how to align me and my emotions and the way that I react and my place in the world, it is more helpful to be able to access others and communicate with others and read a room and know when I'm not needed and know when I am. And like I just want to echo like how incredible that work is, and I think it's something that some people are afraid of because it's so personal and it takes messiness and it takes like sometimes it's not going to work that day,
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, me personally to a fault, I'm like a raging empath, but I think like in the arts all of us are like a little bit empathetic.
You have to have a level of sympathy for sure.
And I love what you said too about kind of knowing your space in the room, because that's something that I guess I wouldn't say struggle with, but I'm such a giver, a mama bear mentality, and I've had to learn in life experiences and in the art of when to step away to protect self and also to honor the space around. But I can be very affected, like in a room, if there is negativity, I gravitate to being the mediator, which sometimes is okay and needed. But other times, especially, depending on what my artistic role is in that space, that's not my place either. And it's only really been over the last couple of years, I've had to really kind of train myself to letting stuff just roll off your back and don't involve yourself. Or if you do feel yourself triggered, either express it, and the room more often than not will hold space for you. That actually happened to me coming back into a process right after the pandemic. I had massive imposter syndrome. I'm still kind of personally wading through that, but things are getting better. But I had a breakdown in the room, and I just word vomited what I was feeling and how I realized this isn't silly that I'm experiencing this, but it's kind of unnecessary to the process and blah, 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 and I just kind of word vomited. But then everyone in the space like honored what was happening and understood, and when we checked out that night, we chatted about it.
That's amazing.
So like there's that, but then there's also realizing, I think this is where my epic war battle thing comes up, like, there are people that you will work with, but then you will not work with them again, or you may need to shed that person from yourself, and that is okay. And if you don't surround yourself with the most positivity that you can, and you allow yourself to kind of dredge down by other folks, usually unintentionally putting stuff on you, that's not going to help your personal goal and aspiration too. And it's kind of like, it doesn't need to be nasty, like shunning those folks from your life, but realizing you don't need to take time to put energy into them, especially if they're not putting energy into you too. And like, that is totally okay.
Yeah.
Because also, personally, like, holding grudges, I think, is like silly. And if the person has done something detrimentally horrible to you, like physically, sexually, emotionally, absolutely, you do not owe that person anything. Goodbye. Right. But if it's something that this person's going to come up in your spheres, or politely decline, or let them know how you're feeling, and then it's okay to walk away.
Yeah.
And I'm saying this now, and I still need to take a dose of my own medicine.
Yeah, same. Oh my
gosh.
But
it's hard. It's hard being, I sometimes say, I'm like the girl in Mean Girls. It's like, I just have a lot of feelings.
Yes.
And like, can we all just be kittens and rainbows?
Yeah. It's just even go here. Yeah.
And so like, I have that patience, and I want to have that universal hug, but there's moments that literally it's like, no. I put my foot down and the Rhaenyra in me comes out.
Yes. And like, that is okay.
Yeah.
Like, I'm realizing that as well, because I feel bad if I put up any boundary with someone. Like, deep down, I'm like, I've tore up a bridge between this person and I've created a tension point. Like, it sucks. It's bad. I'm bad. Right? All of those, like, it all comes back to me.
Yep.
Which is a problem that I have, because I'm like, always thinking about me, but it's a two-way street. So I have to remember that, like, even if this person is like shooting arrows at me, or like literally like in Rhaenyra's setting, like wanting to kill my son or whatever, I have to remember that, like, it isn't about me at that moment.
Yep.
And putting up a boundary and saying, like, thank you so much, but no.
Yep.
Is okay.
Totally.
For all. For everyone. For the whole space.
Yeah.
But it's so difficult to know when to make that call in a professional setting, because you have to finish a thing with a group of people, or, if you end up seeing them again later on, there are people that I don't wish to work with again.
Right.
But at the end of the day, people change.
Yeah,
maybe there's,
absolutely,
a couple of months later, there's a new relationship there.
And everybody makes mistakes.
Totally.
And that is okay. Again, unless if there was no detrimental damage done in your relationship with a person, then I'd like to believe that things will be copable. May not be what you, like you said, like you want to work towards or want to work with that person again. But like, especially in this industry, like people interaction and projects are like revolving doors. Yeah. And it's a small community in Toronto. Like, holy moly. And I've also gotten to a point where if I may have been in a situation, or if I've said something kind of alluding to someone or something, and I know I'm working with that person or that friend, I will just straight up be like, oh my gosh, this happened that one time with this person. I haven't connected with them in a while, or like I just saw them recently. But it's like, I'll just be upfront about like, let's just clear any air. Let's get stuff on the table.
Absolutely. Instead of sweeping it.
We're starting with like a blank canvas, as much as we can. And it is hard. It's hard to do. And it's hard to, again, it's another, the craft makes us be so vulnerable at the work we do, but also like you have to be as vulnerable as a human being.
Yes.
At the same time.
At the end of the day, we are humans.
So you are exhausted and you're like, you feel raw and naked sometimes at the end of the day, because you're like, holy cow, I just had to put myself on blast in so many shapes and forms,
I want to pivot a little bit to like your work as an actor and like being vulnerable and and taking on characters that, could be coming from a dramatic place or could be coming from a very superficial place, like that, just that scope of emotions that, goes into being an actor.
and then being in a space with other actors, like what is that process like for you, like to be able to be naked and vulnerable and raw, and like does it start right from the text? Does it start from images? Does it start from Pinterest? Like where's that start for you?
So I love this question. There's like so many. I'm like, oh, what is my process? So I've always been. I'm going to take it back to like even like grade school, high school years. I was a kid. I was a keener, as they say. I like strived to get 90s and everything, and I did in grade school and high school. I loved learning. I loved every subject. I was good at every subject. Math, it was one of the highest grades. But I look back and it's like, I think it's because I was really good at memorizing formulas and then just placing them into a situation.
That works.
Physics and I, we had a hate relationship. I won't even say love hate. I made myself like 4 hours a night study so that I could get that 90 in physics, and I got it.
Yes.
But you know, but anyways, so I love learning and even going beyond just what the required reading or textbook is. And I also love people and connection with others, and I'm very extroverted. I love working with kids. I love working with older folks as well. I love working with adults too, but sometimes I prefer the other ends of the spectrum. Totally. I love humans and learning, and so I think when it comes to the main reason why I chose to become an artist, become an actor, is because I knew I would be surrounded by humans all the time and storytelling all the time, which I think is so important, even art aside, just as human beings to storytell amongst others, and especially in the digitized and technological world we live in, that's not in the front of everybody's mind. Right. You can go, and case in point with this pandemic, you can go days with just being alone with yourself in an isolated room. So I love community. Also, I'm someone who I love organization and routine, but I don't ever want it to be static. I want it to be changing organization and routine. So I knew I would not be happy in a 9-to-5 day job sort of situation. And so I was like, okay, the arts, like acting and singing, and dancing now. This is a relationship I have with myself. I'm like, I can move, but it's taken me a lot to like realize that I can. That's a whole nother.
You know my philosophy. Everyone is a dancer. Everyone is a mover. So you could definitely put that on your bio.
But as I'm like blushing, I'm like, so sorry, this is like really cracking open.
Take your time.
Going into the arts, being an actor, being a singer, I knew it was something I've been doing since I was a kid. So I knew I had the talent per se. Because throughout my whole life, like people would be like, do you know Jillian Robinson? Oh yeah, she's the good singer. Like that was just the trope that I got.
Category. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And me being smart, and I say this with humility, like I realized I was a good singer. Like, so it was kind of like, I got to the end of high school and I was like, I could go into sciences and become a doctor. Like my dad is a retired general practitioner and my mom's a pharmacist. So there was this, I grew up in a sciencey household too.
Right.
Or I could go into the arts and play a doctor or play a lawyer or so it was also like I didn't know what I wanted to do because I had so many doors, fortunately had so many doors open to me.
Gotcha.
But I was like, you know what? I'm going to pursue my dreams. I wouldn't even say necessarily like acting or whatever was my dream.
I love the irony in which you said that.
But like, I'm going to try this thing. Because I also, and I'm so glad I did. Because I see, like I've said this earlier, like the arts is such a way into humanity that until you're an adult, you don't realize is stripped from you. In a lot of situations.
Yes.
And so the fact that I can be in a space with other collaborative humans, uplifting a story and a piece, to then be in another space with an audience observing, and then the audience and the practitioners on stage are sharing a space and conversation. And then that can be tied with a bow in like question and answer sessions and like talkbacks. And so I think going back to the root of the question, the process for me, I think, regardless of what character I'm playing, whether it's like a clown TYA character or this past summer I played Olivia in Twelfth Night, so Shakespeare, but it was Gravenhurst specific and took place post World War I in Gravenhurst.
Gravenhurst, Ontario?
Gravenhurst, Ontario,
cool.
Yeah. So Olivia, it was with Autumn Smith and Timberbeast Productions.
Okay.
Shout out, fabulous company, amazing human. So Autumn's adaptation was Olivia was a suffragette and a lumber mill owner. So she inherits her dad's lumber mill because he perishes in the war and so does his brother.
Right.
So she's coming into the space having just lost both of those family members and then having to take on a lumber mill as a female in Gravenhurst, Ontario, and also is like a budding suffragette. So a very weighted kind of period specific emotional carriage to bring into that. And then we'll talk about it too. The character I'm about to play is like this spastic MC clown character.
Buttons, right?
Yeah, Buttons. Yeah.
Love that name.
So at the end of the day, it's like, I think the process with whatever type of character I'm playing, I always research first. So especially if it's period specific or site specific, I delve into, this is where the like textbook nerd in me gets to shine. I ask myself questions. It's basically like I do dramaturgical work basically because I love dramaturgy and
cool. It's
to me so important in a space. And so for something like Olivia and Twelfth Night, I was able to, research Gravenhurst in the 1920s and ask myself questions like, Toronto probably would have been the biggest hub where like suffragette movement stuff was happening and how affiliated with Toronto was my Olivia and, shipments for lumber or whatever. Like I started asking these sort of like world questions, but also like practical questions.
Yeah.
And getting to know the area and the space. We actually performed it right on the Gravenhurst Wharf, which had Lake Muskoka behind us, steamships, and the old train station.
So you're right there.
So we were immersed too.
Yeah. How could you not do all this research?
Right, yeah. And then with a character like Buttons, who we'll get into, this clown Panto character I'm about to play, I kind of, it's funny, my research methods change too. So like that, I get a feel of what my role has to be for the piece. Mm-hmm. And then I delve into what side of me has to be in the forefront, which I'll get into in a second. And like, what can I pull from? So the fact that I was a magical sort of imagination force for my niece and nephew who I nannied over the pandemic, and that high energy and sporadic spunk kind of thing, that's kind of research I'm doing, is pulling from those days and infusing that in the character.
Take what you know already.
Exactly.
Like a real life situation.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, too, even with a role like Olivia where there's a lot of sort of outside research that can be done, at the end of the day, when it comes to emotional choices and emotional experiences for those characters, I pull from myself and endow that however it can see fit. And touch wood, I have a brother and a father, and both of them are still living. And I'm close with both of them too. So, when Olivia loses her family members at the top, I can't relate to that, but I have lost my grandparents, or I have, and if I don't want to go that deep too, like I have lost an opportunity or something, right? And then it's layering stuff on that. So I guess, role specific, what is my kind of job for the project is like external research, either in textbooks, online, or like of past experiences, but emotional process, I always make it my own. Yeah. To the point where, people are like, I did a production of Legally Blonde with Hart House a couple years ago, and so many people were watching I think it was 2014 MTV Live thing.
Yes, with Laura Bell Bundy and Christian Borle.
We watch it. Have you seen it? I was like, no, I've never seen it. And some folks were like, oh my gosh, you have to go watch it. You have to watch it. And I'm like, I'm not going to watch it.
Do you have to watch
I'm outside of the project because I don't want to mimic what else is happening or going on.
I get that.
And I was an ensemble track for that, but the judge was like one of my things. And it was well received in the rehearsal space, and the director and choreographer liked what was going on. And so I I know I'm a person that can be swayed very easily by mimicking other things.
Yes.
So I was like, no, I'm not going to watch it. Similarly with like Twelfth Night, like I think as a cast we watched She's the Man one night because that's like a subtle adaptation of it.
Binds,
and then I sifted through the original text, and then I just went straight to the adaptation and just cracked it open that way. I didn't research like what were all the other Olivia, because I knew this Olivia was very different too.
Yes,
what
and
Autumn
Canadian.
Wanted. Yes, Canadian
totally
and hard-nosed too. Like a lot of, Olivia's usually the sort of flouncy foil to what is going on more groundedly with Orsino and Viola, right?
Right.
But whereas it was the opposite, like this Olivia had to be kind of the most grounded force when we're in a space.
Yes.
So any sort of external research would have done disservice to that process.
Completely.
Yeah, so
it's dependent on the project.
Dependent on the project.
Completely,
and so with this too, with musicals, again, dependent on the project, because I read sheet music.
I wanted to talk about singing as well.
Yeah,
so
and I can basically accompany myself on piano, like basic level, with chords, basically, that's the extent. But I can pluck out and notes and rhythm and stuff I'm decent at as well. But it does depend on the project. Because I'm originally from Windsor, so I was a part of the Windsor Light Music Theatre Youth Choir, as was Noah Beamer and Danielle Wade. These are names that folks might know, either in the Canadian or Broadway sphere. We were all little choir kids together.
Humble beginnings.
And shout out to both of them too. Love them so much. And our music teacher had us we just worked via libretto, basically. We had just lyrics on a page, and then we had to listen to what our part was as she played. And I learned this. It's one of those things, like if anyone saw my sheet or my lyric page, they'd be like, what the heck? I would tick up or down like what the pitches were. And like if it would rise here and then fall, or like a weird fall and a big fall. So at the end of it, it looked like a heart monitor on my lyric page.
I know exactly what you mean.
But that's how,
that.
And I didn't even think as like an 8-year-old to ask, like, why don't we have sheet music? Because I was still kind of learning that aspect of the craft too.
Totally.
It just was kind of a normal
language
thing
in itself.
Yeah.
Like notes and the, like treble clef and all that stuff. Yeah, totally.
And then as I started doing other musicals too, and having the score or libretto was an option, and I was learning how to read notation, I would choose the score more. But then as I grew up and started doing projects where it was maybe more like devised musical theater, or like you had the option of both, or is it a musical that I've listened to a lot as a kid and I relatively know what the vibe is, I might go more libretto than notation. Right. Or like something like Legally Blonde, where those songs were in my head, but I'm now an ensemble track. I have to go score versus lyric, because the lyric's going to do jack shit for me.
Absolutely.
And
That's so interesting,
Yeah, with musicals, it just depends on what is the process, what's my experience with the music, and sometimes it's a hybrid. Sometimes I use both, and sometimes I use just one. This past summer, in Calgary Fringe, my friends Katie Miller and Steve John Dale, they wrote an original musical called Flash, which we performed at the Fringe. I had to do the music score because it was some of the hardest music I've ever had to learn, like props to both of them. And it was such a beautiful piece too. So I had to sit with my keyboard and plunk out. But then as we got it up on its feet, I actually had to write out the lyrics in like a lyric notebook. I have a lyric notebook sometimes. And then that's kind of where that switch happened.
Right.
And it also depends on what my partial photographic memory wants of me in a certain project.
Let's circle back here.
Yeah.
So okay.
It's a lot.
You were telling me before. So you can literally like look at sheet music, you can look at a piece of text.
Yes.
And photographically, partially.
Yeah.
Memorize.
Well, yeah.
And you said too, you were also great at like memorizing math formulas. Like that goes back to something like you discovered like in high school.
Yeah. But I think it's retrospectively, I was like, oh, now that I'm needing to memorize so many things in like the career path I've chosen, that's probably why I was so good at math. It's because I can remember even like certain formulas that my grade 11 math teacher had written were in like red marker. Like I'll remember
That color, yeah.
Why that needs to be packed in my brain still to this day, can't tell you.
Where do you Control-Alt-Delete stuff? Like, how do you, like, know that, like, I don't need this? And, like, because I imagine that would be, like, an information overload, which I think you've also spoken to, like, where it can be detrimental to your process and, like, hold you back.
Yeah.
How do you know when to brush away and
honestly,
delete?
It goes away. Like, good. So... The thing is, but it's kind of like weird.
It doesn't like keep you up at night or like...
No, like I could not tell you I could not do a single one of Olivia's monologues from front to finish accurately right now.
Right now,
because that was in the summer and that was July and August and it was a quick turnaround of putting that show up. And I guess this is where maybe I do have more reins than I think on my photographic memory, because if it's go time, baby, I can like, bam, let's activate this.
Like a super
photographic memory,
a literal magician.
Basically, like I can remember which monologues where they were on the page.
Okay.
Like one of the monologues, I can't tell you any of the information, but I know it was like at the bottom of probably like page 5.
Wow.
There's a block of text that I once knew all the words. But I can't tell you any of them now.
Yeah,
but in that moment, it was like, okay,
where it is,
as we flip through the page, and even learning the upcoming Buttons
so
character, I know like what color I've written things in. So if I need to remember things, I'll be like, okay, I wrote entrances and exits in blue, and I wrote what props I need in red. So if I'm on stage and I have a freak out moment of like, oh my God, I can literally picture the score or the script in my head and know, which is decent for when I feel like I'm going to forget my lyrics or what have you. But and this was also a skill I had to develop too, like singing is storytelling. And it wasn't until university that I kind of, instead of treating acting and singing as separate, I fused them together as they should always be. But I was always told like, she's a brilliant singer. And then I also loved to act. So I kind of treated them separately, even though I did musicals and they came together.
Completely,
And so it wasn't until Denise Outrick, again, shout out, and Anthony Bastion, they were my music teachers in the program I went to. And so they were the ones that were like, we did the exercises of see this lyric as a monologue. That was so hard for me.
Right.
Because it's like, I knew I was singing and cracking open something, but I also knew I wasn't fully devoting my storytelling skills to a song. And so when I'm singing a solo song now, I'll be picturing the musical score, but then I can't picture it too much, because if I do that, then it's literally black and white, because I'm picturing a black and white music staff.
Yeah, you get out of the layers.
And you have to delve into, the compassion and the passion and why this, why now, and the storytelling. Yeah. But then if I go there too much, is sometimes I forget the lyrics.
Oh, my goodness.
So it's finding this synthesis that it's different every day. It's also real talk too, dependent on like where I am hormonally.
Yep.
It fogs our brains. There sometimes
gotta find that alignment
that I'm like, the fact that I'm functioning right now is great. You know, your main job is to be a vehicle for the process. So that is honoring the director's text, that's honoring the director's choices and the collective's choices too.
Yeah.
That's also
build up those barriers and then break them if you want.
Yes. And then build in those containers.
Yes.
Basically.
Love that.
But then you're kind of placed in a spot of each moment in a piece. You know, if you're doing a group choreo piece, at least like for me in like a musical, it is the most important that a synthesis is happening with everyone, especially if it's a group number. So choreography is the main name of the game, and everything else is like frosting and sprinkles on top of the choreo.
Yes.
Whereas if you have a two-hander where you've kind of blocked relatively where bodies are going, but it's just acting, it's just text, the acting and the emotion, that is the cake. And everything else that happens is the icing and the sprinkles.
Oh, I love that.
So it's figuring out, I really want cake now that I'm saying
Seems
this.
like we're hungry.
But it's not the same for every piece. Right. It's not the same for every moment within one piece.
Completely.
And that to me is also like the homework to do outside of the room after like a day of rehearsal is splicing out, you know, what is my quote unquote role? Obviously, like, you know what you're cast in, hopefully at this point, but my
in the space,
role in in the collective piece.
Yeah.
And no roles are small roles. Every person on that stage, backstage, behind the table, we're all there to make a thing happen.
Completely.
If I'm tree number 3, I freaking love that I'm tree number 3.
I'm the third tree. Let's do this.
Seriously.
Yeah, totally.
I'm blowing in the wind.
Yeah.
Throwing down my acorns.
What kind of leaves do I have? Am I oak?
Yes.
Totally.
It's so, but it's coming from that mentality too. That's a little bit of a side tangent. But even in school, the training I did, I went to Theatre and Drama Studies program at University of Toronto and Sheridan College.
Very cool.
And I thoroughly enjoyed my time there. And again, being an academic, I loved having the U of T theoretical side and the Sheridan practical side of the craft, and kind of them running parallel and assisting each other. Cool. But the roles I got in my senior years, some of them weren't my first choice, or what I kind of thought the effort I gave in the room, what I kind of thought I quote unquote deserved. But then once I was in the space or in those roles, I realized I was the only one to be able to play that role or that piece. Or
the casting was...
Yes. It was
well done.
Everybody in the room, we all fit where we had to fit to augment the piece. And... that's when success happens. That is when success happens. Right? Yeah. And that's, and I was never known to be a diva as a kid either. So it wasn't really I'm not getting a lead, but it was kind of okay, I feel a bit second option-y. But then once I'm always in a process, it's oh no, it's exactly where you're supposed to be. Making peace with that. Yeah. And I kind of, again, society and the spaces we find ourselves in, don't, and even the training facilities don't kind of teach that from the very beginning of every role is important. There are no small roles kind of thing. Yeah. And it's what you make of it. It's what you put into it. It's what you, and it doesn't, impede future projects. Cause I've graduated 2018, I've been working consistently since. So it's not because I got what I saw in the moment, a short end of the stick, that's going to, instantly I'm not going to be cast as anything when I graduate. But it's a learned thing, and it's something that you have to learn, education aside. You have to kind of learn outside of education. There's a lot of things we can learn and should learn outside of the education system. I wonder if that brings on a longevity of a career, you know, because you're really able to from what I'm hearing, you're able to take a project in that moment, do what you can for it, and then move on. Yes. And know that you did what you could. Yes. And it's not, it maybe won't be the best thing you ever do, but that's okay because now there's a new thing that I can do and learn from it. It's a safety thing for me too. I don't ever want the arts, the career in the arts to become a chore. I don't want it to ever feel overwhelming. Yes. So I spend my time, we again talked about this on the Cup too, binge watching reality TV every once in a while. Right. That helps you to unwind. Yeah. Having a hobby. It's hard in this industry of are you up on what you know? Do you know this? Do you know that? Do you know that? And it's kind of hard to not feel overwhelmed and be oh my gosh, should I be knowing that? But it's no, I think my body just I do a piece and I do it well and I'm in it and I'm focused and I'm being an open scene partner and I'm discovering through the character and I'm discovering through self while doing this process. But then once it's done, it's moving on, and you're taking stuff from there, and you're taking maybe growth that you've experienced as the artist or whatever with that. But if you don't remember how Act 2, Scene 3's choral song goes, who the fuck cares? It's move on. Yeah. You're done with that, right? Yeah. I just want to pivot a little bit to Cup of Hemlock Theatre. Yeah. Because you had mentioned it. I think that from what I've watched and consumed of your content there, it takes a well-rounded person to be able to talk about art and to talk about art in a critical way and have discussion about it and have a curiosity for others who do it as well.
And yeah, I mean, like, I really enjoy what the content that you make there. You have reviews, you have interviews, you have in-depth conversations, you even have readings sometimes too, which is so cool. I was reading that, like, the entire team, like, aims to foster community, creativity, and critical discussion.
Yeah.
Ooh, like 3 huge pillars of, like, well, how we can bring the arts forward.
Absolutely.
How did it get started?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So I kind of was like the last member to kind of trickle on. So it started, the company was originally erected by Edmund Clarke and William Bartley, and it was supposed to be a theater company, Cup of Hemlock Theatre, and actually do shows in person. And so they kind of got together with Ryan Barachovich, Mackenzie Horner, and Christian Teatro. This was like the main squad, and then I joined them. Once the doors kind of closed in the pandemic, we didn't want to have this flame die out of this company, but obviously, like, the doors were closed, so we kind of started spitballing and you know, when stuff opens again, when we were at the beginning of the pandemic, we're like, oh, this is going to be over in a month. It's fine. You know, what can we do? So as a team, we kind of worked through that. But then as we started realizing the doors aren't opening anytime soon, I think it was Mackenzie that was the first one of like, well, let's give some sort of content. And at that time, Stratford had released their Stratfest at Home pieces. And again, I am a dramaturgical nerd, and I was really missing, especially coming off of Heart House. I did 3 shows with them that season, and I had ensemble-y musical roles, so they weren't as sort of like textually, cranially chewy. So at that point in my career, I was kind of like really hungry for dense stuff to chew into. And so when Mackenzie proposed this, I was totally on board, because I also missed that part of my academic side of my training. Right,
being in conversation about
reading a play and unpacking it, and what's the history of it, and what are we seeing on stages fun. And whatever. And so, so we created panels where we would provide the link to watch the show, and it would be like me, and sometimes Ryan and Mackenzie would be on the panel too, or we would get guests. And we would review Stratford's Shakespeare stuff. And at that point, they were kind of like reviews. Like, we would have a section where we would, you know, talk about the production elements, what worked or what didn't work, who was your favorite, what kind of didn't fall for you or whatever. But then there would also be breaking down the play for play's sake section, basically. Cool. Talking about, and this is where Ryan Barachovich, who's also my partner, he's currently doing his PhD at U of T for performance theater and drama. So the theoretical side is his like hub. Gotcha. And so he was very vital in these sort of let's unpack the text from the page questions. Yeah. And so that kept us busy as Stratford kept pumping those out. And then it got to a point too where just I was also craving community and talking with others. And it's a classic thing in like professional practice in training facilities where, you know, our profs say networking is important, and just, you know, if you want an interest in an artistic director or another performer, ask them out to coffee for an hour or what have you. And
hard to do that when you're in isolation.
Exactly. Yeah. But me being an extrovert, I'm like, this is the time when I'd be like scheduling all the coffee dates. Right. But I was like, but what's stopping me from emailing them and then just jumping into a Zoom room? Yeah. So then that just kind of created the Cup interviews. And then so Mackenzie, Ryan, and I were quite like prime players in this sort of like let's curate digital content, and then the other members who the OG members of the Cup, what have you, just sort of pivoted and trickled away from the company. Wow, okay. And so so Mackenzie and Ryan and I have kind of now committed ourselves to this space being what I've just described, like a place where we're, you know, quote unquote reviewing work, doing interviews with artists, having roundtable discussions. I love it. And again, I say reviewing, we are not theater critics. I'm going to say that again. We are not theater critics. We are putting ourselves forward as theater enthusiasts.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Can I just jump on that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's absolutely okay to be a critic of theater.
Yeah.
To critique theater, I should say. Because if we're not talking about what we're consuming and making, then it just floats away.
Yeah.
So, and yes, like, it's all peppered for me too. Like, when I talk about art, it's all peppered with, I just love this thing.
Yes.
I love that people are making stuff and I get to watch it. It is okay to critically discuss what we're doing because in my eyes, it's not that I'm trying to like make those artists feel bad about what they did. I'm just trying to say like, oh, that was a thing that you did. Can we unpack that? Can we realize that like it could go somewhere else?
Sure.
Or in that moment, this was awesome, but maybe it wouldn't work in the next moment.
Yeah.
So that's why like when we met faithfully at a Grim Night back in April, I was like, huh, you like to do that too?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, it's such important work as artists to not just be doing things and making things and then running away from them.
Absolutely.
So I just love what you do.
Yeah, and art is so subjective too, right?
Exactly.
And this is again the mama bear coming out in me of like we're all coming back from a global pandemic. We're still in a global pandemic.
Yes, we are.
And we're all getting our footing again. So in maybe the same role you were playing in the industry before the pandemic, maybe you've put on a whole nother hat and you're now in that role.
Yeah.
Everyone is trying to figure stuff out still.
Exactly.
Yes, are people making mistakes and sometimes being assholes about it? Sure. But we're still kind of getting our footing.
Completely.
And I am of the notion, like, there's going to be enough reviews, quote unquote, that are going to, like, shit on a lighting choice or, like... the way they say it, like, it kind of just comes with how I grew up. My parents would always say, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And I think theater critic has the connotation now of like, oh, you're a theater critic. You're going to come and needle nose my work and get in there and be an asshole.
Right.
Whereas, like how you just said it, critical analysis. And that's why I think, unfortunately, I mean, I guess unfortunately, because I think it's a dope term, like we now have like theater enthusiast is like our main title because,
love it.
Yeah, we get into the space to talk about the work, and there might be things that don't land for another person, but then we talk about it and we unpack. We don't say, well, that was shitty.
Yeah, and then
just close it out.
Yeah, exactly.
And also realizing like some pieces aren't for you demographically,
big one.
age-wise, race-wise, like, and that should never be the reason why you're reviewing something either. It's just literally you watched a piece of art, and Ryan says it beautifully. It's an extension of what we used to do and what we're hoping to do now that things are open again. But when you go out for drinks with a friend after seeing a show and you're just sipping on a coffee or a beverage and you're, diffusing from what you just saw. And bumping thoughts and conversations off each other. Now we're getting companies in the city to ask us to come as like press, basically. That's how we got involved with Grim Night.
Yeah.
And so 2 of the 3 of us go and we watch the piece and then we jump into Zoom discussion and we talk about it. And what's lovely about that is... again, we try our best if there's like a copy of the actual script of the piece we're going to see too. Especially Ryan is really good about this because that's kind of his land. We'll read that script too, so that when we're talking about the production we saw, we can also talk about the theoretical from the page or like the origins of the production. And we pepper that in too, because then it's again, I come from it as too, being a brainiac artist. I love the table read process of any project.
Yeah. Incredible. It's incredible work. Like
Thank
truly
you.
it is.
Yeah.
And like,
and it really is like, it's important for all 3 of us that, and I've always said this, being of the 3 of us now who are kind of more in the practical sphere of like, it is so important for us to support each other. And that is like a universal each other. And because if you're always in community and you're always exchanging knowledge and learning and pivoting, everybody is going to be more successful in the veins that they choose to go down, right?
Yes, community.
So thank feels like I'm so grateful to hear that you feel that way. And
I resonated with it.
That is kind of the vibe that's going forth.
It can change, and it can be like so many different things, which I love. That's so cool.
Absolutely.
Well, definitely go subscribe on YouTube because there's so much content and so much to dive into. And then just before we have to close up real soon, but you're at a show. You're going to be in a show.
Yes.
So November 26th is your first performance.
First performance.
The show is on right now, but people can catch you then.
Yeah. So it's a Cinderella Panto that's happening at Witchwood Theatre with TYT Theatre. The extension is happening from November 26th to December 18th, and I am stepping into one of the roles, like covering one of the roles. For the duration of the extension. So the role I'm stepping into is Buttons, and they are the MC clown kind of character, best friend to Cinderella. Earlier in the year, I did a Rapunzel panto with the same company. I played Rapunzel, and the Buttons character's name was Pockets.
Okay.
I
love these names.
Same kind of vibe.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a lot of fun. So it's an original panto created by Evan Harkai and Thea Fitzjames. They grew up in a small town in Quebec where like pantos were a really vital part of their childhood.
Yeah, clown community there, yeah.
Yeah, and so they're bringing it to the city, and Rapunzel went awesome, and then Buttons, or Cinderella and me coming into Buttons, I'm so excited to kind of jump into that archetype of the panto world. Yeah, so it's you, this character, like I will be the direct liaison between audience and story.
Fantastic.
And it's actually my responsibility to encourage them to do callbacks and boo the baddies.
Ooh, fun.
And play games with me. It's like the fourth wall does not exist for this character at all.
That.
And I love that too. And it's so funny. It's like most of the roles I've gotten post theater school has been these like audience interactive, break the fourth wall.
It's so juicy.
Like, we're here.
It's great.
So
fantastic.
My friend Mackenzie Kelly, who just played the role too, she's a phenomenal artist, and she's given me such inspiration for the role too. She's playing Buttons with such a zany, like almost like kid life, vivacious energy. And it's hilariously perceived by the characters on stage and the audience. So I'm definitely coming into the process with a lot of her vibes inspiring what I bring forth. But I'm also excited to infuse a little, I played Maureen in Rent earlier in the year, and I'm kind of going to infuse a little bit of the rebellious,
bring some over the moon stuff.
Yeah, fight back energy too.
Cyberland.
Peppered into the like quirkiness.
So good.
Fun. It's going to be an exciting kind of final character to round out the year with.
Yay.
And I love working with kids and with TYA. Again, I was telling Bri prior to this recording, I've kind of found myself in a lot of TYA companies and productions post-graduation, and that didn't shock me, knowing that I love working with kids, and I think it's so important to bring the arts to youth. But I am finding more and more like TYA is kind of popping up on a niche of mine, I guess, per se. And I love it. I think it's so much fun. So I'm excited to dive in and try out what it is to, take over a role. But this is also the first time I'm going to be experiencing that whole way of a process. And it's just fun. It's so fun to see. I caught a couple of those shows too, to see everybody in a theater space just like realize this is a show where it's raucous and hilarious and just funny. And the stakes are, they're not massive emotional stakes, but the whole point is it's like slapstick. It's
great.
Albert and Costello. It's, Panto also pulls from Commedia dell'arte. Like there's so many things that the kids are loving it and the parents are loving it too. So
people should get tickets then.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like a fun time.
Yes.
Ticket link will be below.
For sure.
Jill, thank you so much.
Thank you for allowing me to just word vomit my soul and experience.
Anytime. Thanks for letting me do that on the Cup, which you can also check out.
No, and what you are doing with Art Versations, like to send that love right back, like it is so important that something like this exists. Your platform, please, keep doing what you're doing as well. It is so important.
And we'll do a little check-in, in a year or so and see where we're at.
Of course.
Amazing.
Let's do it.
Where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, so people can follow my artist Instagram account. It's Jillian.Robinson96. And there'll be show information posted there, covers of songs.
Yes.
Keep up with however you'd like to.
You did a wonderful cover of Landslide recently.
Yes. Yeah, it was fun.
Is there anything else you want to plug besides Cup of Hemlock?
Just anyone who's listening, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, do things that make you feel uncomfortable to a certain degree, but get out there, reach out there, or just sip a cup of tea, and watch a movie. Whatever
in your bed,
you need,
checking off all of your tasks.
Do what you need. There's a lot of wrenches in the industry and in the world at large right now, and really just what do you need as a human, and go from there with anything else.
Amazing.
That is my
very, very sage advice. Very sage. I need it. Thank you so much, Jill.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to the Art Versations podcast. Please help the podcast community continue to grow by clicking subscribe or follow on your podcast platform, and leave a review. As well, follow the podcast on Instagram at ArtVersationsPod. You'll find photos of the guests you just heard, plus highlights and quotes from each episode. Let's keep the Art Versation going. Send in a DM with your thoughts about art and any questions you might have for guests. Special thank you goes out to Jen Marquez and Maxim Bartnowski for their contributions. And thank you, listener. Till next time.